He's going to try to slow this meteoric rise. Upstate New Yorkers, Jon Jones and Matt Hamill first made their names in the athletic wrestling champions. Tonight, he shoots for Octagon, a pro since 2005, and once again, here's Bruce. When he was the coach of Hamill, any training partner ever.
Jones with a nice right hand.
Trip. There's some crack. One. Another big elbows. Leg takedown. Got the gym.
Goes for a head kick there. Six elbow was made illegal. He's bleeding bad into his arm. Legal.
Rising stars. Defeated by Jon Jones.
Seen fight. Side elbow or
vicious elbows. Vicious. Wow. Has been defeated by
a controversial chapter in UFC history. What happens when the most dominant fighter in UFC history has a single loss on his record? One that almost everyone agrees shouldn't count. You get Jon Jones versus Matt Hamill. The fight that left a stain on an otherwise legendary career. A fight that continues to spark debate, confusion, and frustration among fans, analysts, and even UFC executives. On one side, you have Jon Bones Jones, arguably the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. A man whose name is synonymous with dominance, creativity, and utter destruction inside the Octagon. He ran through the light heavyweight division like a force of nature, leaving legends in his wake, rewriting the book on what was possible inside the cage. On the other side, Matt Hamill, a respected tough-as-nails fighter, known for his wrestling, resilience, and heart. A man who was never an easy out for anyone, and who had earned his place among the UFC's most determined competitors. But this wasn't just a fight. It was a historical anomaly. A bizarre ruling that gave Jones the only loss of his career, in a way that had nothing to do with his opponent's skill or performance. A technicality that, to this day, leaves a question mark next to his otherwise spotless record. So, how did we get here? And why does this fight still spark controversy more than a decade later? Let's break it all down. Jon Jones, the young phenom who took over MMA. To understand why this fight is so controversial, you have to understand Jon Jones. Jones wasn't just another young prospect when he arrived in the UFC. He was something entirely different. At just 23 years old, he had already displayed an almost alien level of skill. His reach, his wrestling, his striking, his creativity, everything about him screamed future champion. He burst onto the UFC scene in 2008, and by 2009, he was running through opponents with ease. Spinning elbows, takedowns, brutal ground and pound. Jones had every tool in the book, and he was writing new pages with every fight. Then came the Ultimate Fighter 10 finale on December 5th, 2009. His opponent, Matt Hamill. It should have been just another highlight in Jones's growing legacy. Instead, it became the only blemish on his record. Matt Hamill, the underdog who stood his ground. Matt Hamill wasn't a household name like Jones, but he was respected. A former collegiate wrestler and the first deaf fighter to compete in the UFC, Hamill had built a career on toughness, grit, and a grinding style that wore opponents down. He had beaten some solid names, but against Jon Jones, he was facing a monster, and from the opening bell, the fight played out exactly as expected. Jones dominated. He secured an early takedown and unleashed a relentless barrage of ground and pound. Hamill had no answers. Jones was overwhelming him with elbows, punches, and positional control. And then, the mistake happened. As the infamous 12-6 elbows, the rule that changed everything. In a moment of brutal efficiency, Jones unleashed a series of downward elbows, striking Hamill directly in the face with what's known as 12-6 elbows. For those unfamiliar, a 12-6 elbow is a straight up and down elbow strike, banned by the unified rules of MMA. The reasoning? The move was deemed too dangerous, based on an old, outdated belief that it could generate excessive force similar to that of a martial artist breaking bricks. The problem? Fighters have landed far more devastating strikes that are completely legal. The 12-6 rule has long been considered unnecessary, a strange relic of an older era in MMA regulation. But that didn't matter in this fight. Referee Steve Mazzagatti saw the elbows, stopped the fight, and penalized Jones. After reviewing the damage, officials declared that Hamill couldn't continue, not because of the elbows, but because of an earlier shoulder injury caused by Jones's takedown. Still, since the illegal elbows were the final strikes, Jones was disqualified, and just like that, Jon Jones had his first and only official loss. The fallout. Should this even count as a loss? Here's where things get controversial. Jon Jones was dominating the fight. Hamill was completely outmatched. The illegal elbows didn't change the outcome. Hamill was already done. The fight wasn't competitive in any way. Yet because of a technicality, Jones was handed a disqualification loss. Even UFC President Dana White has called for the result to be overturned, arguing that Jones was the rightful winner. White has been vocal about his frustration, stating that Jones should have a perfect record and that this fight was an unfair blemish on his resume. But despite appeals, the decision still stands. The legacy of the fight. What it means today. For Jon Jones, this fight is nothing more than a bizarre footnote in his career. It didn't slow him down. He went on to become the youngest UFC champion ever, defended his title a record number of times, and eventually moved up to heavyweight, cementing his place as one of the greatest fighters of all time. For Matt Hamill, the win was bittersweet. He never truly beat Jon Jones in competition, and even he admitted that Jones was the better fighter that night. While the record book says he won, Hamill himself has acknowledged the circumstances were far from ideal. For the UFC, this fight remains one of the strangest rulings in MMA history, a prime example of how the rulebook can sometimes get in the way of common sense. Final thoughts. The fight that never really had a winner. No matter how you look at it, Jon Jones versus Matt Hamill wasn't a normal fight. It was a battle between a rising legend and a respected veteran, overshadowed by an outdated rule that robbed the sport of a clean result. For Jones, the loss means nothing. His legacy is untouchable. For Hamill, it's a win that doesn't feel like one, but for MMA fans, it's a reminder that even the best fighters can be taken down, not by their opponents, but by the rulebook. One decision changed the record books forever. But did it change history? You decide.